we look close, okay, we have our nicely straightened linen, and now we're going to want to check our fabric layout to know how it needs to be folded. So this fabric layout is always in the first few pages of your pattern instructions. I have the folder here and ready to be cut out, and here's my layout guide for instructions. It comes in, dress or top, because this one does, and then you'll see different potential layouts depending on how wide your fabric is. So we're going to want to use the one that's 130 to 150 centimeters wide. We'll always use the one that's, we have 145 centimeters here to work with, but we can usually get away with the 150 centimeter wide layout. And I like to kind of line it up where the fold on the page is the same as the fold in my fabric. So I am going to fold this in half, which is usually what we end up doing. So it'll be a little bit hard to see, but what I want to show you is now that we have a really nice straight cross grain, both, all the way across and, on both ends of the fabric, we have a great tool now to line up our fabric so it's beautifully aligned both vertically and horizontally. So I'm doing this on a cutting board. Cutting boards are super useful for this because you get an extra visual reference. But if you're doing this on the floor or on your dining room table, don't worry about it. You can still eyeball it. It makes it even more important to make sure that you have that great visual reference. So what I'm doing to get all nice and straight is I'm kind of flapping a little bit this edge here, and then I'm also gently kind of coaxing my straight edge here to also be straight. And then once I'm pretty close, I'll kind of take that, let it kind of wave out a little bit, and you keep gently fussing with it to get everything totally lined up and straight. Once you're really close and you feel like you've got selvages in pretty good shape, you can start to do it a little bit more of a wave across your fabric. And then I'll get my selvages right up against my line here, make sure that they're straight. And I'll go all the way to the end of the fabric, even if my fabric falls off my table, which it almost always does because we are usually using like 3 or 4 yards of fabric and we don't have a 3 or 4 yard table. I still want to really line up the selvage all the way down so I don't have a weird, surprise when I work with the fabric at the end of the table. So once my selvage is really nicely lined up, I'm just going to continue to gently coax and shake out our fabric all the way across to the fold, and then smooth it all the way down the length of the fabric that I'm working with. And what I have now is not only a nice straight grain, the selvage, but I also have a nice straight grain at the fold here, which is what we want. So you won't be folding it up into quarters like this, but that's okay. We'll just look at it so it's easier to see online here. So when I have my pattern pieces always tell me where the grain line is. So the ones that are designed to go on the fold, they say something around like fold here, place to fold, like this Mercer Miller Blends does. And I can also tell because on my cutting layout here, our top front and our top back are both along the fold line here. So what I'll want to do is, now I know that my grain line is straight because I did all this work to straighten things out. I'll make it even a little bit straighter when I line my fabric up against this pattern piece. And I want you to notice that instead of like pulling and pushing like right here, what I'm doing, which is easier to do when there's only one fold, is I'm gently coaxing from actually the total other side of my fabric. And that way you're lining up and perfecting the grain line all the way across your piece and not just like manipulating it at the end and it'll be all kind of wibbly wobbly all the way across. So keep fussing with that until I feel really good about like, yeah, all the way across. This is right exactly on the grain line when I press it down just a little bit, and that would be ready to cut. So I also will have pieces that look like this. And they'll say cut to, they won't say cut to unfold, and then I'll always have this arrow that tells you right where the grain line should be. So with this kind of piece, I'm just going to get my fold here out of the way for demonstration purposes. So for this piece, we'll put it out in alignment with our layout. And what we'll want to do to make sure that it's in the right on the grain, kind of in, you know, floating in the middle of all our fabric here, is we'll want to, just going to move it so you can see what I'm doing here. We'll want to use a quilting ruler, which is way over here. This is an invaluable tool for cutting and for layout and for all kinds of things that you do in sewing. So if you don't have one of these, this is a great thing to get. I'm going to use my quilting ruler to line it up anywhere with the grain line. And then I want to make sure that it lines up perfectly with our selvage here, down at the very bottom. So just push this a little bit. So I just made it all wibbly wobbly, so it doesn't line up perfectly. But I'm going to make this all nice and straight again. Okay, I'm thinking it looks really good. I'm going to do weird wrinkles here. I lay down my piece. And then let's see how we did. So it's looking really quite nice. I've got 1/8 of an inch all the way across down here. And I'm perfectly in line with my grain line on my sleeve. So that would be how you tell that these cut-only pieces that don't have the fold line for reference, that they're totally on grain as well. So once you've, done all your cutting, a lot of times you do have that fabric that needs to go on the table. A quick trick with that is what I do so you don't lose all the nice layout that you've done with your fabric is I will pick it up from the table with like a foot of give on either side, and then I'll kind of lay it over the part that I'm going to pull up to move to my next section with my fabric, and then I'll kind of let that next side keep on going and just kind of gently toss it and try not to pull, because it will end up being better when you do it like that. It'll take you less time to get it resituated. So that concludes our video here on getting the layout all correct for our grain line. So when you cut, you're going to do a fantastic job. It's going to be straight on the grain, and then you're going to come up with a beautiful piece. And so congratulations and good for you. Thank you so much.